The day Port Charles stopped breathing. Morning in Port Charles is usually a chorus of small sounds: the distant grind of traffic from the avenue, the clatter of coffee cups settling into saucers at Kelly's, the river muttering to itself below the bridge. On this morning, those sounds feel thinner, as if stretched across something frayed and about to tear. The tension doesn't scream. It whispers at the edges of every conversation, waits in the pauses between sentences, hides behind doors that insist on locking themselves. What follows is a day braided from separate strands: an investigation, a family implosion, a survivor's uneasy return, a romance against the clock, a secret that begins to rot, and then, like all Port Charles days that become legend, it narrows to a single, devastating point. The investigation that refuses to sleep. Dante returns from his run the way a detective returns from any temporary exile, with reluctant lungs and an overactive mind. Sweat cools on his shoulders while he and Chase move through the facts like men testing thin ice. Judge Heron's name is the kind that makes phones ring after midnight. Her rulings shape futures and endings. Now her case file is a thicket of redactions and quiet fury. Layered atop that is the investigation into the shooting of Drew Kane, a crime that still bleeds into friendships and living rooms. What Dante and Chase share is a rhythm, question, silence, possibility, doubt, and the growing certainty that these two investigations are not parallel lines at all, but rails on the same track. It is not conversation that pushes Dante to the stables so much as instinct. Some answers stop talking when they see a badge and start hiding where hay muffles the sound. Cody's there, all nerves and fast hands, telling a horse named Outback to tuck itself out of sight, as if an animal's presence can tempt the universe into confessing. When Dante vents about Jason's latest miracle, Britt Westbourne, living, breathing, and stubborn as ever, Cody's face opens with shock. The dead returning is practically a local custom, but it never lands softly. Each resurrection rearranges lines of loyalty and debt. Each one asks who you'll forgive to feel relief. The Quartermaine house turns on its axis. The Quartermaine mansion is a place engineered for conflict. A grand staircase built for dramatic exits, corridors where whispers carry, a front door that opens like a curtain rise. It's here that Willow arrives with Scout, and the smaller footsteps jog Wiley's memory of joy. He barrels into his mother's arms with the uncomplicated faith of a child who believes every return is a homecoming. But houses like this run on rules as much as electricity. Willow is here for tradition, Monica's annual blessing over the start of school, but Tracy stands in the doorway like a bouncer at the border. She is the old guard with the iron gaze, certain that Willow's timing is opportunistic, that sentiment is a weapon dressed as a bouquet. Brooke Lynn plants herself where all Quartermaines eventually do, between the fire and the oil, volunteering to shepherd the children while the adults do what they do best: weaponize concern. That act buys a few quiet minutes and one dangerous conversation. Michael's jaw holds so tight it could crack a molar. Willow's smile is all porcelain and pressure. She argues that goodwill today could become mercy tomorrow, a small courtesy that might look good under the eyes of a new judge. She speaks in hypotheticals with the confidence of someone who has read the end of the chapter. Michael does not grant her the satisfaction. His coldness doesn't flare, it calcifies. It is the frost that forms when hope finally stops moving. Then Willow drops the grenade. Drew believes Michael shot him. She balances threat with heartbreak, tells Michael that if prison swallows him, the children will never be forced to visit steel and fluorescent light. He denies the accusation with the flat steadiness of a man who knows anything he says will be turned into a dagger. Wiley returns before the argument can curdle further. A boy's backpack zipper is suddenly the loudest sound in the room. Willow misses the school drop-off she promised to make, but leaves a trail of insinuation and a parting vow to spend more time with her son. Michael watches her go as if memorizing both the exit and the pattern of the floor she walks on, in case he needs to reconstruct the moment for a judge or for himself. Elsewhere under the same roof, Chase is confessing to Brooke Lynn that he has information powerful enough to poison Willow against Drew permanently, evidence that would solve one problem by detonating 5 others. The rules of his badge chain his hands. Lines of conduct were drawn to keep the city safe from men who think their ends rewrite the means. Today those lines keep him from saving people he loves from themselves. Brooke Lynn does not argue against honor, but she is a Quartermaine and therefore speaks the dialect of pragmatism. Still, she says nothing that tempts him to betray his oath. She knows better than most that winning the wrong way attaches interest you pay in blood. In the kitchen, Willow reappears, all innocence and excuses about a forgotten water bottle. It is both plausible and practiced, a reason that doesn't invite questions. She asks after Judge Herron with the casual tone of someone who never speaks casually. Chase offers the only answer he's allowed: "I can't help you." Her smile is the shape of disappointment turned to strategy. Port Charles thrives on oblique angles. Truth is rarely a front door. Today it slips through back halls and kitchen entries and makes eye contact for exactly as long as it needs to. Rooms that lock themselves above Bobby's, a room has been pressed into service as a safe house and insult all at once. Britt wakes into the scratchy comedy of witness protection on a budget. Towels that don't cover enough, doors that lock as if out of spite, showers down the hall that turn privacy into an errand. She returns from steam and wall tile to find herself banished by an automatic latch. It's almost funny, and it would be if she hadn't already died once on Port Charles' time. Survival narrows patience. When the door finally yields, she steps into the corridor wearing only the towel and a fury that fits her better than any robe. Downstairs, Carly is doing what she has always done, turning fear into a plan and the plan into someone else's job. She needs Jason to protect Michael, not because she doubts her son's worth but because she doubts the patience of fate. The possibility that Michael pulled a trigger lives in her the way thunder builds behind the eyes, a pressure, a presence, a certainty that something is coming even if it never does. She reminds Jason of old debts, the secrets she's held, the babies she's protected, the messes cleaned so love could keep its shape. Jason listens as only Jason can, like a vault with ears. Britt interrupts towel first, proof that discretion is a luxury none of them can afford right now. The tableau is almost operatic, Carly's eyes narrowing as she realizes whose room Jason borrowed, Jason standing like a pillar between two storms, Brit mocking the kind of trust that has strangled men in this town and saved them in the next breath. The room becomes a mirror where old alliances stare at their reflections and wonder if they still recognize themselves. Carly's snark curdles into something resigned. Brit's contempt is born of intuition as much as history. In the end, they separate the way oil and water do, not because they want to, but because the laws are the laws. Lovers on borrowed time. Across town, in a borrowed bungalow with ocean postcards for windows, Jocelyn and Vaughn live inside a clock neither of them can stop. The world they've built speaks in low laughter and wet hair and stolen mornings that pretend afternoons will always follow. They talk about Brit's secret and Jason's shadow and the way truth can be both a rescue and a wrecking ball. They know that their romance is an hourglass someone has already turned. So they do what lovers on borrowed time always do. They stop bargaining with tomorrow and lean hard into now. In a city that treats happiness like contraband, they decide to smuggle as much as they can across the border. A memory with fingerprint. Trina meets Kai with caution dressed as calm. The Drew shooting is a story with too many narrators. Each retelling edits the lighting and leaves out a line. They try to keep their distance from each other not because they want to, but because guilt touches those standing nearest the explosion, whether they lit the fuse or not. Together they replay the night the way dancers mark steps without music. Somewhere inside the choreography, Kai's memory opens like a trapdoor. A bat. His. Fingerprints etched into its surface like a signature he never meant to write. The object is both nothing and everything. A piece of wood until it isn't. A narrative hinge that can swing an investigation toward or away from the truth depending on who first touches it with gloves. A witness, a plea, and the truth that arrives too late. At the mansion again, Tracy beckons Jason with the urgency of someone who has too much to lose to be polite. She tells him she saw Michael fleeing Drew's place the night a gun turned conversation into siren. Her eyes are not weapons today, they are lifeboats. She wants Jason to protect Michael, to exercise that peculiar power he has to stand in falling buildings without being crushed. And she asks him to tell Monica, because pain is always easier when it is spoken by someone who refuses to rush the words. Jason climbs the stairs that have hosted every version of a Quartermaine confession. He returns minutes later with eyes that look like they've been rained on from the inside. Whatever speech he composed for Monica has dissolved in the acid of finality. There will be no difficult truth to share, no argument to pause midway, no scolding wrapped in love. Monica is gone. The sentence strikes Tracy not like lightning but like floodwater. Slow at first, then everywhere, a map redrawn in an instant. For a moment, no one breathes. The house, the quarrels, the portraits, the stubborn furniture, remembers how to be silent. It is one thing when a judge dies. The city straightens its tie and debates precedent. It is another when Monica Quartermaine dies, the city loses a parent. She stitched families together that refused to admit they were bleeding. She turned strangers into sons and daughters with a glance, mended what medicine couldn't with a soft authority that didn't ask permission. Around town, phones begin to vibrate with the small messages people send when words aren't big enough. Did you hear? Tell me it's not true. Where are you? Grief sets schedules. Casseroles are assembled. Memories queue for their turn at the podium in every kitchen. What comes next? The day collapses into night but refuses to end. Dante and Chase still have their questions, only now an empty chair at the hospital weighs them differently. Cody has to live in a world where the dead do return and sometimes lock their own doors. Carly and Jason retreat to separate corners with a new calculus to solve: how to guard a sun without casting a shadow so big it obscures the truth. Willow pivots, as Willow always does, aiming her steps where the law and love intersect, convinced she can find daylight there. Michael stands alone on a landing and stares at his hands, every absence he has ever known crowding his knuckles. Brooke Lynn will hum a lullaby the children won't remember but will always feel, while Chase stares at his badge and measures the distance between justice and mercy in inches only he can see. Trina and Kai contemplate the shape of consequences. That bat is a story waiting for a storyteller. The question is who gets to hold the pen first. Jocelyn and Vaughn, warm with borrowed sunlight, hear the sea and imagine it's promising them more hours than it ever has to give. Britt wraps herself in a robe finally, not because modesty wins but because war requires armor, even the terrycloth kind. Somewhere, a file on Judge Heron sits on a desk like a coiled thing, waiting for a hand brave or foolish enough to reach. And at the center of it all is the room Monica left behind, the bed neatly made as if it knew to be respectful, the vase on the nightstand holding flowers with the decency to droop. Tracy will sit on the edge of that bed and straighten a blanket no one will use, because some acts of love are maintenance, some griefs are domestic. Jason will stand in the doorway and consider every unspoken sentence he has ever carried, then let them go one by one, not because they don't matter but because they do, and because letting go is sometimes the only apology the living can offer the dead. Port Charles will gather, as it always does, dressed in black and bright memories. People who haven't shared a room in years will share a pew. Enemies will choose silence over victory for a day. Stories will be told, some true, some improved, and laughter will shove its shoulder against tears because that is how this town honors its healers. Later, the investigations will resume. Secrets have no respect for mourning. A bat will be found or not. A judge's ledger will add up or refuse to. Britt will decide who gets her truth and who gets her sarcasm. Jason and Carly will draw new lines around Michael and call them fences, not walls. Willow will revise her strategy, because love is also strategy here. And Dante and Chase will lace their boots and start again, because questions do not solve themselves. But before any of that, there will be a stillness, heavy and exact, where the city remembers the woman who taught it how to survive itself. In that stillness, you could hear the river hold its breath. In that stillness, the Quartermain house, so loud, so alive, learns the cost of silence. The sun will rise tomorrow, it always does, stubborn and undeserved. Whether forgiveness rises with it is another matter. Whether truth does, another still. For now, Port Charles stands in a doorway, one hand on the frame, listening for footsteps it already knows it will never hear again.